So today's daf is daf Yud. We'll pick up where we left off yesterday, 3 lines up before the end of daf Tesamid Beis. My time. The Gemara is asking about Abaye. Abaye was interpreting a statement of Rav, and in the case of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, we said that the principle of 2 Achios who fell for Yibum, Asur L'zeh Muteres L'zeh, does not apply. And therefore it's not mentioned in our Mishnah. So why doesn't Abaye interpret Rav in such a way that our Mishnah could be referring to Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo? And the Gemara answered, this was the last thing we touched on yesterday, is Kevan de Rabbi Shimon hu de Mishkachas La, hu Rabbanan lo Mishkachas La, beplukta lo kamayri. The possibility of Asur L'zeh Muteres L'zeh would only be feasible in the case of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, according to Rabbi Shimon. But according to the Shitas Chachamim, it's absolutely impossible. So our Mishnah, says Abaye, is not referring to cases that depend upon a machlokas. And if this din of Muteres L'zeh, Vasur L'zeh, could only work out according to Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon has a case in which there is no Iser of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, that Iser only applies according to Rabbi Shimon in the case where the brother was born before the Yibum of the other brother who was Ba'olama. If the Yibum of the second brother, we called him Shimon, took place after the birth of Levi, and then Shimon dies, and Eishes Ruvain, who's now Eishes Shimon, because Shimon was Miyabim Eishes Ruvain, now she falls for Yibum to Levi, then in such a case, there is Yibum. That's not Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, because once Shimon steps into the shoes of Ruvain, and Levi is born after Shimon was Miyabim Eishes Ruvain, in that case, that's not called Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo. So therefore, according to Reb Shimon, it could work out that you could have a case of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, which is Muteres L'zeh Vasur B'zeh, but according to Rabbanan, it's impossible, because if he wasn't B'Olamo of Ruvain, then it doesn't make any difference as to whether or not Shimon's Yibum of Eishes Ruvain took place before Levi was born or after Levi was born. It's irrelevant. There's always going to be an Iser of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo. And now we're up to Rav Safra. Rav Safra has a different interpretation of Rav, and he disagrees with Abaye. Rav Safra Mitargem, he interprets that with regard to the din of Achios, Af the Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, it could work out even in a case of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, and Mishkachas La, this case of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, B'Shitza Achim, with regard to 6 Achim. So we're going to have now Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun, V'Aliba de Reb Shimon. And here we start Daf Yud Amud Aleph. Simoncha Meis Nolad V'Yibem. Meis Nolad V'Yibem. So Ruvain died, and Yisachar was born. And Yibem Levi, Meis Shimon, V'Nolad Zvulun, V'Yibem Yehuda. According to Rabbi Shimon Shita, we could have a scenario of Eishes Achiv Shelo Hoya B'Olamo, which it could be Muteres L'zeh Vasur L'zeh. And therefore, our Mishnah could work out even according to that scenario. So that according to Rav Safra, Rabbi Chia, when he was quoting Rav, as far as the Mishnah is concerned, he included the case of Shtei Achios, of Asura B'zeh, Muteres L'zeh, and even in a case where it would only work out according to Rabbi Shimon and not according to the Chachamim. In other words, according to Rav Safra, the Mishnah will enter into a machlokas. And therefore, Levi, whose shita we learned about yesterday, in the case of Imo Anutzas Aviv, would add a 16th category of an erva. And even though that doesn't work out according to Rabbi Yehuda, but nevertheless, we're not interested in the principle of beplukta lo kamayri. However, Rebbe, right? Rebbe did not agree with Levi, and he pushed off Levi. He says hani klali lesle. Rebbe did not agree with the principle of Rab Chia in the name of Rav that in all the cases of arayos that are mentioned in our Mishnah, Asur b'zeh muter s'zeh, according to Rebbe, we would not have the case of Eishes Achim Shel Balomo because it can only work out according to Reb Shimon. And our Mishnah is Beplukta Lo Kamayri. And now the Gemara is going to offer an alternative approach to answer the question why Rebbe pushed off Levi as far as Anusas Imo is concerned. Rav Ada Karchina Kame de Rav Kahana Omar Mishmei de Rav. So this is what Rav Ada said in front of Rav Kahana in the name of Rav. Liolam Islay Rebbe Hani Kloli. Rebbe accepts the klal of Rav Chia in the name of Rav, and in all the Mishnayos, I apply the principle of Asura Bazeh Lazeh Muteris Lazeh. And even in Eishes Achshel Ahoy Bolamo, which could only work out, as we said, according to Reb Shimon, nevertheless, the Mishnah is interested even in cases of a machlokes. But Hachi Kamerlo, here is the reason why Rebbe rejected Levi as far as Imo Anusas Aviv is concerned. And now the Gemara is going to rely on the Mishnah at the beginning of the Perek Arba Achim, which has two cases. One is where two sisters fell for Yibum to two brothers. And one of these two sisters was Asura on one of the two brothers. She was Muteris to the second brother. The second was just a flip side. In Imo Anusas Aviv, Bechada Mishkachas La, Betati Lo Mishkachas La. In the case of Eishes of Achiv Shelo Haybo Lomo, you could only find this din of Asur L'zeh Muteris L'zeh not in two achios or shtei achios, she'rak achas mem yanusas aviv, achachos muteris l'shneim. In what case can you find a nusas aviv, which is only relevant to one of the two brothers? He says, "Betarte lo kamishkachas la." It's impossible to have two Yevamos who are sisters, who fell to two brothers, and one is Asur on this Yavam because of Imo Anusas Aviv, and the other sister would not be Asur on the other Yavam. She would also be Asur on the other Yavam from the same Isa. Is Ein Miskayim Be'er V'zu Klal Ha'amor. In the case of Anusas Aviv, you cannot have a situation of Asur L'zeh, Muteris L'zeh. And that's why it was omitted from our Mishnah. And the Gemara now explained why it's impossible to have Muteris L'zeh, Asur L'zeh in the case of Imo Anusas Aviv. I Yaakov Shtei Achios Anas. If Yaakov had an ones with Rachel and Leah, two sisters, Yodalo, Rachel, Leah, Yehuda. So Yaakov, in addition to having another wife, he has a daughter from Rachel, and that's Levi. He has a daughter from Leah, and that's Yehuda. But both Rachel and Leah were not married to him, out of wedlock. And now you have Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven and Shimon are brothers from the same father through an illegitimate relationship of ones. I'm sorry. I'm talking about Levi and Yehuda. I got mixed up in the names. Levi and Yehuda, brothers from Ones, and then there are two other brothers, Reuven and Shimon, from Yaakov's wife. So Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda are all brothers from the same father. Reuven goes ahead and he marries Rachel, who's Anusas Aviv, and she's the mother of Levi. Shimon marries Leah, the sister of Rachel, who's again Anusas Aviv, and is Imo Shel Yehuda. Now, when Reuven and Shimon die, then their children, their wives, will fall to Imo, Anusas Aviv. Achosehi Yevimto Mishkachasla. They're two sisters that fall for Yibum to their own sons. And then we will apply the principle of Asura L'zeh Muteres L'zeh. It's impossible. Why? Because just like each one of them is Asura Mishum Bina of Imo, that's going to apply to our sister as well. And that's called Achos Imo. So in both cases, whether it be Reuven or Shimon, it's always going to be Pturos min achalitza umin hayivu. And therefore, with regard to a case where Reuven and Shimon died without children, and their wives, Rachel and Leah, respectively, fell for Yibum to Reuven and Shimon, which are a situation of Imo, then it's going to be an Asura on both of them. On one of them, Chum Imo, and the other one is Achos Imo. So you could never have a situation of Muteres L'zeh, Asura L'zeh. How can it be Muteres L'zeh if she's Achos Imo? The Ish stay Nachios on us. Maybe you'll offer the following suggestion. Yaakov had an illegitimate relationship with two women who are not related to each other. Those are called Nachrios. And from those relationships, he had Levi and Yehuda. Then these two women got married to Reuven and Shimon, who are sons of Yaakov. They died and they fell, the Anusas fell in front of Levi and Yehuda, in front of their own sons. In this case, because we don't have a Chos Imo, because they're not sisters. However, there's another principle, and that's called Achosa Shehi Yevimta, which is a case where there is Chalitza or Yibum, Lo Mishkachasla. In other words, the Mishnah wants to be Mechadej that even in a person is Osir Bachos Zekukaso, but if the Zkuka is an erva, that's not called a Chos Kukasa, because the erva makes it impossible for a Zika to be Chal. So therefore, Achos Muteresla. If both of them are Nochrio Zulazu, then Beikach Enkan Isra Achos Kukasa. So the whole connection of the Mishnah falls away. The Mishnah wants to mechanish that Achos Kukasa doesn't apply in a case of an erva, because she doesn't fall for Yibum, and therefore there's no Zika. And there's no Achos Kukaso, but in the case of Nachrios, there's no Achos Kukaso. So once again, we understand very well why the Mishnah doesn't mention Imo and Nusas Aviv. Again, not because the principle of Muteres L'zeh Asura L'zeh doesn't work out, but because the principle of Achos Shehi Yevimto doesn't work out. And now the Gemara is going to offer an alternative explanation for Rebbe as to why the Mishnah omits the case of Imo Anusas of Rav Ashi Omar Li Olam Lesle Le Rebbe Hani Kloli. Rebbe doesn't have the klal of Rab Chia in the name of Rav, And therefore, according to the sheet of Rebbe, we're not forced to say that on all the arayos that are mentioned in the Mishnah, we have the principle of asur l'zeh muteres l'zeh. Rebbe never bought into that. So therefore, the answer of Rabbi Abba that we had before is not acceptable. To say that the reason why Rebbe rejected Imo Anusas Aviv is because there's no asur l'zeh muteres l'zeh. Not only that, Rav Ashi says that Rebbe holds with Plukta Kamayri, that the Mishnah will even enter into a machlokes. So therefore, you cannot explain according to Rebbe that the reason why the Mishnah left out Imo Anusas Aviv is because it doesn't work out according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda has an Iser of Imo Anusas Aviv. But rather, Umay, what did Rebbe mean when he pushed off Levi and he said, Kimdumini Shein Lo Moach, because Tadi doesn't know what he's talking about. This is what Rebbe intended to say. My time lo dayak masnisen to masnisen Rabbi Yehuda. Why didn't you learn the Mishnah properly? And you'll see that the Mishnah itself is a reflection of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda says that Anusas Aviv is Asura. And if the Mishnayos of our Perek reflect the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, then we understand why Anusas Aviv could not be included in the list of arayos that pater up that Saraseim min Achalitza min Hayivum, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, Anusas Aviv is Asur, is Asur Olav. And therefore, he Asura he Afli Achim Mishum Anusas Aviv, even though it's not really Imo, because it's not his mother, but it's a woman that was Anusas Aviv. And if it's not Eishes Achiv, it doesn't pat up the tzara. B'chol she'ena Eishes Achiv, ena poteres es tzarasa. She'ein p'tur tzura el b'makom iser Eishes Ach. So the Gemara says, I'm going to prove to you that our Mishnah reflects the Shita Rabbi Yehuda. The Ketani, we have a Mishnah later on in Daf Yud Gimel, Sheish Harayos, the 6 Arayos that are listed and enumerated in that Mishnah on Daf Yud Gimel, Chamuros mi Elu, meaning from the 15 Arayos in our Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechet. Because in the case of the 15 Arayos, they are Asuras only on the Yavam. But as far as the other brothers are concerned, but as far as the brother who was married and died, she was Muteres. She was only Asur on the Yavam. So that means Reuven married a woman who's related to Shimon. But she's not in any way an Erva to Reuven. However, in the case of the 6 Arayos Chamuros, there's going to be an Iser even on the late brother. In other words, they would not fall for Yibum because there was not a legitimate marriage to the late brother. And therefore, the other wife of the late brother, who's the Tzara, would fall for Yibum because she's not considered a Tzara of an Erva because the Erva was such that she was Asura even on the late brother. And therefore, there was no valid marriage between, let's say, Rachel and the late brother, which would create a status for Leah of a Tzaras Erva. The Eluhaim, and now we have a list of 6 Arayos, Imo, V'yeshes Aviv, V'yachos Aviv, Achos Me'aviv, V'yeshes Achi Aviv, V'yeshes Achiv Me'aviv. So the Gemara now is going to conclude that the Mishnah reflects the Shita Rabbi Yehuda. By Imo, what is Imo listed here? Now, the Mishnah lists both Imo and Eishes Aviv. So if it's a valid, legitimate marriage, then by definition, it's Eishes Aviv. So why do you mention Imo? Imo is always Eishes Aviv. So why do you have Imo and Ashes Aviv as two separate categories of the six? If you're going to tell me that this woman was married to his father in a valid, legitimate marriage, I know Ashes Aviv. So why do you have Imo and Ashes Aviv? You have no choice, Elalav. By process of elimination, it must be referring to Anusas Aviv. Ukitani, Mipnei Shein Nisuos Lacherim. Lacherim in, Li'achin lo. So it means that there was a violation of the marriage law with regard to Reuven who died. The late brother had married a forbidden woman, which is Anusas Aviv. Isman Shamet to Islay Isfara, which Tana actually maintains that Anusas Aviv, even though she's not his mother, is nevertheless Asura Olav. It's Rabbi Yehudi, the Asar, the Anusas Aviv. It's only Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, we know that the Mishnayos reflect the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda in our Gemara. Umishum hachi lo tani le. Now the Gemara understands Rabbi very well. Why doesn't it mention Imo, Anusas Aviv and Mishnah, included in the 15 Arayas Upata that Sarah? Because the answer is, our Mishnah reflects the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. And if that be the case, and that's not going to be relevant to Tzara because there's no such thing as a Tzara unless it comes from the Ach. Amalei Ravina Ravashi, Rabbi Yehuda Nami Mishkachas. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, we can find a case of Imo Anusas Aviv, who's Nesua Liachid. How could you have such a case? The Avar bin Nasiv. Now here we get into the machlokas between the Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva about Chayvei Lav. Our Gemara here is going to reflect the sheet of the Chachamim that Kedushin Tovtzim Chayvei Lav. And number two, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Anusas Aviv is an Isur Lav. It's not an Isur Karetz. And therefore, if a man, will call him Reuven, went ahead and he married Anusas Aviv, so although he violated a lav, nevertheless the halacha validates and recognizes that marriage. And if he dies without children, she, who's Anusas Aviv, will fall for Yidden to his brothers. And since she's Asura ala Yavam be'Isur Ervas Imo, he poteres es Tzarosa min hachalitza min hayibam. So it's interesting. As far as the status of Erva is concerned to Pater up the Tzara, even Chayvei Lavim is considered an Erva. And therefore, we go back to the question of Levi. Why didn't the Mishnah mention Imo Anusas Aviv, included in the Arayos that Pater up at Tzara? And Ravashi answers him, De'i lo katani. The word De'i means a violation, a marriage with a forbidden woman. Is lokam lokani. The Mishnah is not interested in a case where only b'di'evad the marriage is valid. The Mishnah is talking about cases in which, as far as Reuven is concerned, the late brother, he had a legitimate marriage that was permissible according to halacha with his wife who fell for yibum. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana below the nami mishkachasla. Even without entering into a case where there was a violation of the Isur Nisuin and he married a woman that was forbidden to him, I could still come up with a case in which Imo Anusas Aviv would pater up the Torah. What case? Yaakov Onas Kaloso. So Yaakov has a son named Reuven who's married to Sarah, and Yaakov now violated two Isurim. Number one, he had an honest relationship with Sarah and violated Eshesi. She's married to his son Reuven. And number two, he's Kaloso. We could call him an evildoer. V'holid mimenu ben. Now Shimon is born. Shimon is the son of Sarah, who is Eshes Achiv Reuven, who makes Reuven below Banim. Benofla, his wife Sarah, falls Kami Bra to her own son, and Migu De'i Asura, Tsarasanami Asura. Since she is Ervas Imo, the Erva of Imo, as far as the relationship between Tzara and Shimon is concerned, is Tsarasanami Asiro. The Tzara is also Ptura Minachalisa Minayibum, like any Tzara's Erva. So again, we're back to the question, why didn't the Mishnah mention Imo? And that would jack up the number from 15 arayos to 16. Amalei Kahana responds, Bi'achva de Tera Kamairi, Bi'achva di Surah Lo Kamairi. Our Mishnah is only interested in Achva of Heter. But Achva that was created through a Bias Isur is not the subject of our Mishnah. Therefore, the Mishnah doesn't mention Ervas Imo, Anusas Aviv, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's impossible that there could have been a valid, permissible relationship of marriage between the late brother and his wife. It would only be possible in a situation where the child who eventually becomes the Yavam was born as a result of a Bias Isur, because the father had a relationship, a rape relationship with his Kala. And now the Gemara says that Levi himself added to our Mishnah, Imo Anusas of it. V'af. Af means even though Rebbe pushed off Levi with a very strong language, he says, Ein lo moach b'kod kodo. Nevertheless, Levi insisted that our Mishnah adds Imo Anusas of it. And again, it doesn't appear in our Mishnah because our Mishnah is printed reflecting the sheet of Rebbe, but according to Levi, there's actually a 16th case. And al pikein, meaning af al pikein, badka. Badka means Levi checked out the exact text of our Mishnah, Lev b'masnise, and in his Mishnayos, there was Imo Anusas Aviv as well. So even though our Mishnah reflects the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda as we've proven previously, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can only find a case of Ashes of Anusas Aviv that patters up the Torah through an Isur. Nevertheless, Levi holds B'de'i Kamairi. Our Mishnah talks about even De'i, even in a case where the Nisuin is only valid for the Eved, and there was a violation of a forbidden relationship in the marriage itself. The Tani Levi, Imo. Levi had Imo in our Mishnah. And he said the following: Pa'amim poteres tzaras, pa'amim eno poteres tzaras. Ketzad Haisa Imo nisuas aviv v'niseis li achiv me aviv. And he has another wife who mace, and he died. His brother died without children. Zui Imo she'eno poteres tzaras. Why? She is a surah ala Yevamot. She's Imo shala Yevamot. And now she's Imo of both the deceased brother and the Yavam with an Isa Kares. And this is called Imo Ashes Av. Now, in the case of Krisus, Chayve Krisus, Ein Kiddushin Tovsin, even according to the Chacham of Rabbi Akiva. So since she wasn't Ashes Ames at all, because there was never a valid marriage relationship between the deceased and this woman, his wife, who fell for Yibum, therefore, there's no Zika at all, because Zika is only generated by a valid, legitimate marriage relationship, but this marriage relationship of the Imo is not valid at all. So if that be the case, then only his other wife, who's the Tzara, would fall for Yibum. She's not a Tzara's Erva, and she's Messiah Bemetz.